Good morning. The July 28th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council is now in session. Warden Liz Danielson presiding.
Good morning, everyone. I wonder if you would take the roll call, please.
Warden Danielson.
I'm here.
Councillor Moffat.
Present.
Councillor Roberts.
Present.
We will be having a new member join us in a moment, but we'll wait until after our new member of County Council, Councillor McKechnie, takes the oath of office. Councillor Burton.
Present.
Councillor Ryle.
Present.
Councillor DeVolen.
Here.
And Councillor Shell isn't with us today.
Thank you. Before we pass the motion to adopt the agenda, as our CAO mentioned, we do have an additional item, and that's the appointment of an alternate county councillor. So could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the amended agenda, please? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So we do have a rather unusual circumstance for County Council. Given the extended illness of Councillor Kennedy, Dysart et al. Have appointed Walt McKechnie as their alternate county councillor. So I'd like to offer my congratulations to Councillor McKechnie and turn the meeting over briefly to our CAO, Mr. Rudder, to swear Mr. McKechnie in.
Thank you. I've actually provided the declaration of office to our new councillor, and so I will just ask him to read it, and we will arrange to deliver the signed copy to our office at the earliest convenience.
Thanks very much, Mike and Madam Warden. I, Walt McKechnie, have been appointed to the office of alternate councillor of the Council of the Corporation of the County of Haliburton, do solemnly promise and declare that I will faithfully and impartially exercise this office to the best of my knowledge and ability. I have not received and will not receive any payment or reward or promise thereof for the exercise of this office in a biased, corrupt, or in any other improper manner. Excuse me. I will disclose any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I will be faithful and bear allegiance to Her Majesty Queen II, or the reigning sovereign for the time being. And I make this solemn promise and declaration conscientiously, believing to be true, knowing that is of the same force and effect as if made under oath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Councillor McKechnie.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you, and I sure don't like the circumstances, but I'm really hoping it's going to be just temporary, and we're all hoping that. I know that, and I promise you that I'll represent the municipality of Dysart in the county of Haliburton to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McKechnie. So does anyone have any pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of June the 23rd and our special meeting of July the 5th? Councillor Moffat and Councillor Ryle.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that the minutes from the June 23rd, 2021 regular meeting and the July 5th, 2021 special meeting of Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. There's no business arising from our previous meeting, no delegations, nothing from Committee of the Whole, as that didn't happen this month. Nothing from Joint Accessibility. So we move on to Planning and Environment. And the first is a report on the electric vehicle charging stations. I think we'd be bringing Corey McKay, and our planner, Steve Stone.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of council. You've all seen me fairly recently at your local council meetings, with the exception of Minden, who will see me tomorrow. So today I'm looking for the approval of an electric vehicle charging station at the county level. So the county site is a bit unique in that it's a partnership with the Township of Minden Hills. The Township of Minden Hills would be the site host since our shared parking lot is on their property. So they would be the ones to actually enter into the agreement. So today seeks the approval for the county to split the costs and revenues 50-50. The costs for the 2 dual port charging stations are an annual fee of $5,000, which breaks down to $2,500 per dual port station or $1,250 per port. Electric infrastructure upgrades are required to bring power to the site. The recommended location is just below the retaining wall, below the county office. So this comes at a cost of just over $13,000 altogether, or just below $7,000 for both the county and the Township of Minden Hills. So it's estimated that each port would need to be in use by the public for about 3 hours each day for a cost recovery of the annual fee. Or if we're looking at cost of the annual fee and the electrical upgrades, about 4 hours each day. So if approved, installation of the station would take place in the fall, and the electrical infrastructure upgrades would need to take place as soon as possible. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions on this item? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept this report? Councillor Burton, Councillor Roberts.
Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received for information the July 28th, 2021 staff report on electric vehicle charging stations at 7 Milton Street, Minden, Ontario. And further, that staff be directed to present the agreement with Ivy to the Township of Minden Hills Council as the owner of the subject property for review and signing. And finally, that upon receipt of an authorized agreement between the Township of Minden Hills and Ivy, the County of Haliburton agrees to pay 50% of costs for the electric vehicle charging stations as outlined in the July 28th staff report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Next up is our forestry and bylaw activity report. I'm not sure who will be, oh, there's James, so I gather James will be speaking to the report.
Yes.
Hello, good morning, Warden Danielson, members of council.
Good morning.
Pleased to bring this report to you. Yeah, it's been a while since I've come to council with a report, so I can cover for the forest conservation bylaw, cover the period of March 31st, 2020 to March 31st of this year. We had 14 permits for harvesting, and a really good percentage of those were in accordance with good forestry practices, 13 out of 14. And so things ran fairly smoothly with the forest harvesting operations. I didn't have a lot of problems with those operations this past year. But moving on to the shoreline tree preservation bylaw. So I have a 1-year period documented from, well, the entire year of 2020. And we had 52 site visits, which is up quite significantly from the previous year. 5 fines levied, 3 stop work orders. And now the majority of those 52 site visits are, as stated in the report, there's occasionally people asking me to come out for a tricky situation that, you know, pre-consulting to make sure that they're going to be abiding by the shoreline bylaw. I get a few of those, lots of phone calls. but a few site visits. Then there are warnings for very minor issues, follow-ups regarding previous issues. So it could be a stop work order from the previous year or work order that's being looked at. And many times the sites I go out to see are fully in compliance, although a concern was raised, and that's what brought me to the site. Quite often I find that people are in compliance. And then obviously those ones where fines and stop work orders are issued, they are not. So, and then maybe interestingly, I just added the last 6.5 months have been busier again. So up to, as stated, 45 site visits already this year, with 4 fines and 8 stop work orders, and getting some of these work orders in place from previous issues as well. So that's an ongoing process. And those work orders, I should note, they can be in effect for many years. It takes a long time when we ask people to, when we issue a work order and people are required to plant trees, they have to maintain those trees until they reach a size of 5 centimeters, which is the protected size in the bylaw. The smaller trees can be removed. So to get a seedling or a young tree to make it up to a 5 centimeter diameter can take more than 10 years in many cases. And so people are sometimes surprised to learn that work order follows the property. So even if there's a change of ownership, the new owner would be responsible for the maintenance of those trees. And maybe just before I go on to weeds, I could take a moment here and just sort of go over what I typically, some of the more common scenarios I see, if you're interested. Some of the most common problems and where people go wrong.
That'd be great.
Okay. So in addition to some of the very clear violations of the bylaw, there are some others that are a little more nuanced. So when people are adding fill to a property, so be it topsoil or sand, they often don't seem to be aware of the potential damage they're causing to trees. So then that damage may take years to show up, 2 or 3 or maybe 5 years in some cases. So adding an inch or 2 of sand or topsoil is not the same as adding a foot or more of sand or topsoil. And that's where, some of these work orders come in where if fill was just recently placed, people are having to remove the fill because of the damage that ongoing damage to trees, especially hemlock trees. Some trees and some sites are more sensitive to that than others. So, and sometimes that's marshy areas. People want to get to their shoreline, but they've got a marshy shoreline. That's not maybe the most common scenario, but there are shorelines like that. And so many times I'm suggesting a boardwalk. It's a nice clean way to get over beautiful, diverse, marshy lands to get to your shoreline, rather than, trying to make a 5-meter pathway with fill, and you're dumping in on top of everything that way. So another common problem I'm seeing is people using oversized machinery for making a pathway. If you've got a giant machine that's really made for making roads, it's just not appropriate on the shoreline. So that crops up. We've got people who want to take full advantage of removing the small trees under 5 centimeters on the shoreline. And in doing so where they can do that, so if they own the shoreline right to the water, the portion of the land they own, they are entitled to cut the trees under 5 centimeters in diameter. Once that's done, some people are realizing, well, they've lost really the future forest. So if we have some canopy decline, whether it be a windstorm, ice, some sort of damage to the upper canopy, there may not be much left on those shorelines, depending on, whether it was sometimes have a lower, a mid, and an upper canopy. And sometimes the mid canopy isn't there. So you've got the upper canopy and then these younger trees. And if there's a windstorm and you lose a portion of your upper canopy, there's nothing left there to take its place. And so that's a concern on some properties. Just quickly, one or two more things. There's been a few people who misunderstand about a pathway to the water. They have a pathway. It may be up to 5 meters wide, and then they want a boat launch. And a lot of people are seeking their own private boat launch, and there is no provision in the shoreline bylaw for a second pathway to the water. So only one. And I guess one of the common things too is people sometimes clearing before their building permit is fully in place. So they may clear an area they think they will be building in, and through the permit process, maybe that gets adjusted and they've cleared a footprint that is, offset from what is to be approved. So that's why we require the building permit to be in place before the trees are cleared within that 100-foot or 30-meter zone. So I hope that's helpful, just to give you a picture of what I see out there from, a lot of the time.
Do any members of council have questions about this portion of James' report? We'll start with Andrea and then Carol.
More of a comment. Thank you, James, and thank you for that additional information, because I know there's been a few cases in Dysart that I've certainly heard about. And it's just disheartening. That's all. We've had this tree preservation bylaw. Here we are trying to work on a shoreline bylaw to make things better. There couldn't be more information out right now from people to try to protect the lakes and why we're trying to expand the bylaw that we currently have. And yet it's not that our bylaw is not working. We have it. It is working. It's being enforced. People have a complaint mechanism. It's being abused, or it's being ignored. And that's really, really disheartening. So it's just a comment. Thanks.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Yeah, James, thank you for that extra information. I think the what seems to be an increase in pre-consultation is good. Sort of the understanding is getting out there. I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about sort of the demeanor or the attitude of folks that you encounter. Are people understanding and apologetic, or are they crusty, or are they defiant, or a mix of all of the above? Or because we do know that there have been inquiries. How many complaints are there? And I think we could probably all agree there's far more transgressions against this bylaw occurring, this existing bylaw occurring, than are reported, which then makes it look like we don't have a problem, but we do. You just need to drive in a boat on any lake and you can see the damage that's being done. So what do you hear? What are you seeing and feeling from folks when you have to go and see them?
Well, as you described, there's the whole range. It is, there are a number of people who are, they know they've made a mistake, and just through rushing through a process or hiring someone who wasn't as diligent as they had expected them to be, people are often pretty sorrowful over the whole thing. But then there are the full range, the ones that are tougher to deal with as well. So I see that whole range, and that's what I'm dealing with out there. There's a lot of eyes. Maybe there's more eyes on things now, and there's a heightened awareness. So that could also be contributing to the higher numbers I'm seeing, rather than it strictly being, shoreline clearing gone wild. I don't think that's the case. There may be an increase, but maybe not as strong as an increase as the number of site visits I have, because I am getting lots of attention.
Any other questions on this portion of the report? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warden. Just through to James. Way back when you started your report, James, you had mentioned that I think there was 14 permits had been taken out, forestry permits.
Yes.
How does that compare to other years?
It's down significantly, but the area harvested was similar. So fewer permits, but for larger blocks, and you know, having maybe people having work where one permit lasts them the full season, as opposed to doing many small properties. So that's one of the differences I'm seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions on that part of the report, if you'd like to carry on with your report, James.
Okay. Yeah, weed inspections continue on for this year based strictly on concerns and complaints from the public. So this year there's been just sporadic occurrences of giant hogweed, no increase over previous years. And in fact, there's a few areas that have now been treated for multiple years, and finally the seed bank is being exhausted in some of those locations. And so in one case, there were no new sprouts where I would have expected them to be. So that's showing that it can be it can be solved through with being persistent on a site. It's that seed bank with giant hogweed and many of these others. It can be 5 to 10 years. You know, once it's dropped a bunch of seed, those seeds can be viable for a long time. So you really have to be consistent in treating it to eradicate it. Not that we would eradicate it from the county, but at least from some sites. On the rail trail, you know, since we've had the extended motorized season, I'm not even sure when it started this year, but I didn't get any complaints. I'm not sure if there was a delay due to COVID, whereas they normally get on in May. But in any case, you know, there may be concerns on the rail trail, but they're maybe not related to bylaw enforcement. Maybe that's why I'm not hearing about it. I'm not hearing, you know, I can't do anything about user conflicts or bad behavior or dust. So I'm not saying there aren't issues, but they weren't bylaw issues that came to my attention. And then lastly, forest pests. So some of these have been mentioned before, but just to update you, hemlock woolly adelgid has now been confirmed in Ontario and not eradicated. It's southern Ontario, and so that's a concern, the movement of hemlock from that site, certainly. But we've kind of known this is an invasive pest that is very likely to establish itself in Ontario, just because of the proximity to the US outbreaks and the possibility that this can travel with birds. So, you know, it was quite expected that that this was going to happen. Hopefully we don't have it in Haliburton County. We need to keep certainly a careful watch out. And there's a group of stakeholders collaborating, looking at ways to mitigate and to have that early detection and ways to manage it. So that's ongoing. Those things aren't completely resolved, but there may be some advice coming forward as to how you might manage if you have a forest or a shoreline that's, you know, dominated by hemlock. Certainly, there are some things that can be done there. And of course, we're all rooting for biocontrols. They work so well with purple loosestrife, and certainly hoping that in North America we can find something that will work in our area as a natural sort of biocontrol that will put this pest into balance with the ecosystem and not have it be such a devastating effect on hemlocks. So there's lots of information online. invadingspecies.com is a good resource for that, as well as others. And any suspected cases can be reported through that hotline at invadingspecies.com. They have a phone number as well. And ultimately, this would come to the attention of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, because they are still at this point regulating this very serious pest. So there would be involvement from them if it were to be found. Emerald ash borer finally made its way into Haliburton County towards the south end, and we don't know. We notice it 2 to 3 years, maybe even 4 years after it arrives in an area. So we don't know how much further it spread, but that's been mapped on a system called eddmaps.org. And I encourage anyone else who confirms an outbreak of emerald ash borer, they'll actually help you make that confirmation to continue putting those spots on the map, so we really know where the hot spots are, and hopefully people will voluntarily restrict the movement of, if they know the firewood especially is infested, not to just keep spreading it further within the county. And beach bark disease is, I guess, an older story now. We're all getting used to it, learning to live with it, and but there are still pockets where the disease is still killing trees that are. There are some areas where it's really swept through, and most of the beech trees are dead, and other areas where this is still occurring. So still a concern for hazard trees, and people are trying to keep up with it.
Are there any questions of James on the remaining portion of his report? Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just circle back on the invasive weeds. And I was interested, well, for the emerald ash borer, or your comment about the biocontrols. I certainly would like a biocontrol for Eurasian water milfoil, which is running amok in our lakes, but that's maybe for a different day and not within the forestry portfolio. The invasive weeds and the identification of them does come up quite often, and I know we have some stuff on the county website, but I wonder, given your report, it's maybe a bit timely. Is there an opportunity for a communications blitz with the identification of some of these weeds, and the CFIA hotline? The most common question is, who do I call? And people think you call the township and they'll send the magic bus out to take away the hogweed. And I think there's a disconnect as to whose responsibility it is. So just wonder if there's an opportunity there just to put that back out again to lake associations and through social media to further educate the public on what to do on these weeds. Thank you.
Good suggestion. I see our CAO taking notes, so I suspect that there will be some follow-up action on that. Any other questions? Councillor Burton, then Councillor Royale.
Thank you, Warden. Through to James. Do you get any calls or many calls about Phragmites?
Not this year. I guess we've spoken about that before. People have contacted me about it before, and we're sort of realize our limitations with it. So no, short answer, it's not been on the radar this year.
Okay.
Councillor Royale.
Warden Danielson, may I ask a question regarding the logging?
Yes, I'm not sure we'll have an answer, but go ahead.
This is related to the post logging. Once the contractor has left, in many cases, I know the ones that we've seen in our area, they look like a war zone. And I was wondering, are there any minimum standards for rehabilitation that need to be left? Because in some cases they do a really great job, and within 2 or 3 years you can hardly notice where they've been. In other cases, I don't know if it'll heal in a lifetime. But I don't know if there's any minimum standard that they need to leave them in. If so, do we know who would be responsible for ensuring that that is being properly enforced?
So, we see the private land operations versus the Crown operations. There's more control on the Crown land operations. However, they do a variety of cutting techniques, and sometimes doing the right thing for the forest in a shelter wood environment where there's a higher percentage of trees being removed. It can look that way, and it's fairly, I don't want to say normal, but it really is the way that business is done in the forest, and that's how we come to have some of the beautiful forests that we have now. Began that way. So now there are some where we've got ruts and there are problems like that. So the bylaw, when we've got good forestry applications, I'm finding there's more control over those operations, and there's often a forest manager involved who can take things steps further than I can with just strictly the bylaw stating which trees can and can't be removed, but the bylaw doesn't speak so much to the way the site is left. So those sites are often better managed, and I would encourage people. The Haliburton Forest has a lot of demonstration sites, and looking at. I agree with you. A year or two after an operation, it's normal for things to look like a whole bunch of trees were just removed and the tops are down. And then you look at 5 to 10 years out, and you might walk through and think what a beautiful forest this is. So it's just part of that change, and with nature, we see the same thing. A tornado, or a fire looks awful, and given time, that's how we have the forests that we have now. As a lot of them have originated from disasters. So, but if there's anything specific, there are sites where problems do occur, and if they're brought to my attention, I can at least speak to it and educate and enforce the bylaw wherever possible.
Councillor Rowell, a follow-up, and then Councillor McKechnie.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think that's so true. What concerns me is that some of the heavy equipment is used to fill in or remove mounds, which basically exposes soil now that can no longer grow anything. And secondly, in many cases, it's all pushed into a huge pile, sometimes as many as 15, 20 feet tall, and it stays there. And I guess eventually, at some point in time, it's going to rot. That's what I was asking, not so much the average, because I think everybody knows that, and thank you very much for clarifying that. But I'm talking about the exceptions where maybe there wasn't enough time left in the project, the rain wasn't right. I'm not sure what the circumstance would be, but something got basically overlooked. Would it be someone like yourself that we would bring it attention to? I appreciate you may not be able yourself to do anything about it, but the people, who do we bring the attention to so that something, if anything, could be done about it?
What you're describing sounds almost like a landing area, and some of the wood that is left on site. And yeah, I mean, it's something that could come to my attention. It's not something that our bylaw would be a good tool to address it with, but I guess just on a case-by-case basis. There really is no other agency who's going to come out onto private land to look at something like that. So
Just before we move on to Councillor McKechnie, I just wondered if it might be timely for us to be reviewing our forest conservation bylaw. You see a benefit in that, or some gaps that we need to address?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. It hasn't had a review in a long time, so I think at least we could do that at a higher level and decide where to go.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKechnie.
Thank you, Madam Warden. Question for James. Do you have any concerns about trees are falling, like large trees eroding into the lake? Where I've had people in my ward call me over the years. Is there anything that you recommend that they can do in regard to shoring it up with river rock or whatever? Like I say, I've had quite a few calls, I'd say in the last couple of years, about very large trees, and they're trying to save them. And I'm just wondering if you have any ideas how you can save them.
So I guess as a forester and looking at the more naturalized shorelines and seeing trees that have fallen in, 100 years ago, and trees that continue to do so, it's not a concern. I don't view it as a concern on like an ecosystem basis, but however, if it's your front yard, that's a different story. And people are sometimes trying to place rocks and things. I'm not an expert in that. I'm not a tree doctor. It's more, I look at things from the forestry perspective. So yeah, and those other shoreline stabilization techniques, that's really a different field of expertise. So I don't have a lot of advice for people other than to contact an arborist and see if there are any solutions. But trees have been falling in the water for thousands of years, so that's part of, again, of why our lakes and rivers are as beautiful as they are. It's that all those that diversity and that downed wood is an important part of the ecosystem.
Thank you.
I think that's one of the items that the draft shoreline preservation bylaw may address in that if a tree is looking like it may cause damage or is of danger to the residents, that it can be cut down, but there's encouragement to, as James said, just let them fall into the water and be part of the natural ecosystem that all our creatures seem to enjoy, water creatures. But it is something that we would be addressing. Any more questions for Mr. Rogers? Thank you, James. Your report was timely and informative. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Moffat and Councillor Burton, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Burton. Be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 staff report on forestry and bylaw activity be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next up is the update on an agreement for consulting services for a municipal plan review. And I believe Mr. Stone will be speaking to that.
Thank you, Madam Warden, and to the rest of council. Came to light probably last week that we were running out of time with our existing plan review consultant. And so staff busily approached them about an extension, which is allowed in the existing agreement. And they agreed that they would be happy to provide the service for another 3 years. And we asked them about their adjustments to their fees, which they came back and asked for a 10% increase. That prompted us to do a quick scan of their charges recently. And what we were finding is that they were well below their upper limits in terms of the fee schedule that was approved last time by council. So with that, staff are confident that they will continue to provide excellent service on behalf of council in terms of peer review, and it won't be detrimental to applicants applying for their various development applications throughout the county. Happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Are there any questions on the extension of this agreement? Could I have a mover and a seconder to recommend approval? Councillor Roberts and Councillor DeVolen.
By Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor DeVolen, be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 staff report on the update on agreement for consulting services municipal plan review be received by Haliburton County Council, and that staff be authorized to proceed with obtaining an agreement with the Greer Galloway Group Incorporated at the negotiated fee schedule.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And finally is your planning department update.
Well, as council will know, I've only been on the job for less than a couple months. So much of what I've been doing over the last 6 or 8 weeks has been about reviewing capacity within the department and getting up to speed on some of the projects that we're working on. So with that, there's not much to sort of update council on other than what's in the report. I certainly can say that the upcoming meeting tomorrow has been quite exciting with a lot of interest in the special meeting of council. But beyond that, it's sort of getting up to speed, as I said, and reviewing capacity within the department. So thank you.
Are there any questions on the planning update? Councillor Roberts?
Just a question about tomorrow night, and I have been advising people if they wanted to speak, they had to register, but otherwise they could be watching on YouTube. And I have it in my calendar that it starts at 6 p.m. People who are speaking, are they given a time limit? I just don't want to still be on Zoom at 10 o'clock at night. Like, so I'm sorry to, that sounds grumpy, but I'm just going to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. So I've been encouraging 5 minutes, to be fair. As of this morning, we have 21 registrants, and that would put us in line at 5 minutes to be 2 hours. So I'm anticipating it to go longer than that, but that's what I've been encouraging so far. Thank you.
Other questions on this report? If we could have a mover and a seconder to accept the report. Councillor Moffat, Councillor DeVolen.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor DeVolen, be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 report on planning department projects be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, next up are administrative reports. The first is the correspondence summary listing. Is there anyone who wished to support any of these pieces of correspondence? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the summary listing? Councillor Roberts and Councillor Moffat.
By Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that the correspondence listing for the period of June 18th, 2021 to July 20th, 2021 be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we have with us now our new treasurer, Andrea Pull, to speak to the following reports. First up is our check register for June.
Good morning, Warden and Council. Yes, the first is our check register for June 2021. So our total payments issued for June were $1,471,826.32. Did anyone have any questions on any of our purchases?
Are there any questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the check register? Councillor Moffat. Councillor Burton, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the check register for June 2021, and further that the check register for June 2021 with checks, EFTs, and PAPs totaling $1,471,826.32 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is the payroll register.
In June, we had 2 pay periods totaling $452,254.01. Did anyone have any questions on that report?
Any questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor Rayl.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Ryle. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives the staff report on the payroll register for June 2021, and that the payroll register for June 2021 with net direct deposits totaling $452,254.01 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. And next are the year-to-date actuals.
To date, 48.17% of operating expenses have been incurred. We should be approximately 50% spent as of the end of June, so we are on target there. And 5.06% of capital purchase expenses have been incurred as of the end of June. Are there any questions?
Any questions or concerns? Could I have a mover and a seconder to accept this report? Councillor Roberts, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the staff report on the year-to-date actuals as at June 30th, 2021. And further, that the year-to-date actuals as at June 30th, 2021 be hereby approved.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you.
Next up is a Affordable Housing Target Program Steering Committee report. Is there someone who's going to be presenting that, or?
That's me.
Well, there you go.
Thank you. We're actually excited to bring this report forward. We've had a long-standing shortage of purpose-built rental in the county of Haliburton, and so this is the first large proposal through our Affordable Housing Targets program by a private sector developer. So that, again, you'll recall that when we set our targets, there were 250 that were going to be built by nonprofits like KLHHC, but then we were looking at 500 units over the next 10 years from the private sector and other not-for-profits. So this is a really good step in that regard. We're looking at about 12 units in total, 8 of them being affordable. The subsidies that are being requested involve waiving a pre-consultation fee, a site plan security fee, condominium application fee, and an official plan amendment fee totaling $10,300. Those are all waived fees. There will be very little or no costs incurred by the county other than staff time to do those reviews. Unless there are other questions, I think that is the extent of my presentation. The one thing I would note is that I've had some conversations with council already. We are proposing to meet with the CAOs in the fall, in September, with the housing manager and the Affordable Housing Targets Program Coordinator to talk about developing consistent policies across all of our jurisdictions so that we have similar, if not identical, rules about this, what fees you will consider waiving, those types of things. So it gives us a bit of a policy framework to work within. But we don't have that now, but we're hoping to do that. We should also note that Dysart yesterday approved a substantial contribution towards this project as well in a number of waived fees. And so this really is a collective effort.
It's definitely exciting to see this project being proposed. I wonder if there were other applications or if this was the only application that we received.
There were other applications, but they were deemed not ready to come forward. We are doing this on a quarterly basis now. So some of those are being tweaked or some additional information being gathered, and hopefully they come forward in the near future.
I do look forward to our developing a policy to sort of have an equal playing field for what we're going to agree to waive and not. Do council have any questions about what we're proposing? Councillor Roberts, then Councillor Moffat.
Mine is more of a comment on the project, if I may.
Absolutely.
Because not only this waiving of the fees was on the municipal agenda, but also we had a delegation from the proponent, Richard Carson, earlier on the agenda. And so Dysart council meetings are up on our website, on our YouTube channel. You may want to view that conversation. And there's also some sketches of what the structures or the units will look like. In total, there'll be 21. So currently what he's applying for is 2 units of 6 apartments each. And in a phase 2 development, there'll be another on the same property for 9. I asked him if there's accessible units. There's 1 in each of the 6 plexes. And when he builds the 9 plex, there'll be 2 accessible units. They're very, very tasteful. They're on Maple Avenue, and just behind them is that Park Lane Apartments, which also runs, their driveway sort of goes on the one side. So this will also have their driveway beside it, if you will. So houses in the apartment complexes facing the street and the parking in the rear. They are so needed, and we're very excited. It's a different situation to be working with a private enterprise coming into this. And so I was really proud of Dysart Council yesterday for passing this. One of the biggest things that we had to waive, which we're actually funding, is that the sewer hookup fee. And Dysart in the 2021 budget set aside $10,000 for economic development, specifically for housing, specifically for this type of project. So really proud that Dysart, that somebody came to town and wants to do this type of apartment and purpose-built apartments. Condos are great, and $1 million cottages on the lakes are great, but this is a gap in what in a housing need that is needed in our county. So that's all. Thanks.
Well, and it's in a great location, close to town, so people can access town well. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you very much. And I wonder too, I'm sort of speaking through you and council to the CAO, but we had the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan advisory table is getting going. And I wonder if these are the kind of reports that could be cleaved off and sent to them sent to that table and on an ongoing basis, so that the data collection is continuous and current. So we did talk at the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan advisory table, there's lots of words there, about what information they're getting. And we see something later on in a report from the Poverty Reduction Roundtable about what data was provided to that group. And we had a conversation about data being the most important thing to guide the decision-making, and making sure that the county can be, and the advisory table stakeholders can be equally as informed about each other's business to make the right decisions going forward. So if we could find a way to, keep a file of these kinds of reports to keep going in that direction, it could keep our level of knowledge and data collection current going forward to make some very important decisions for the future. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions about this report? Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report and approve the waiving of fees? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor McGackney.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that the report from the County of Haliburton Affordable Housing Target Program Steering Committee 2021 Affordable Housing Target Program recommended projects be received, and that subject to the necessary bylaws and agreements being forwarded to Council for approval and the successful completion of such planning and development processes as may be required, the recommended applications received through intake COH 2021-001 of the Affordable Housing Target Program, providing a total of 8 affordable housing units in the municipality of Dysart at all, be supported as described in Table 1. And I won't, it's basically 8 units in Dysart. That the following municipal incentives falling within the County of Haliburton responsibility be approved. Hot Pond Enterprises Corporation, pre-consultation fee of $400, waived fee. Hot Pond Enterprises Corporation, site plan security, $1,500, waived fee. Hot Pond Enterprises Corporation condominium application fee, $6,900, waived fees. Hot Pond Enterprises Corporation official plan amendment fee, $1,500 waive fee. That's everything.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And we look forward to the CAO's discussion on standardizing or a policy that standardizes the waiving of fees. So next up is the Public Works status report. We would bring up in our Director of Public Works. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Warden and Council. With regards to our status report, notwithstanding some staff shortages, but also some challenging weather, we made some good progress over the last 6 weeks since our last report. So if there's any questions with our status report, please feel free to ask.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Councillor Moffat, Councillor Roberts.
I really can't believe you let him off that easy, but okay, we'll read them. Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that the July 2021 status reports on capital projects, operations, and road maintenance be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So next is the Rhodes capital budget summary. Maybe we'll hone in on this a little bit more than the last report. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, no, thank you. Regarding this report, we're just reporting on just the Rhodes capital budget. Halfway through the year, we've got a fair number of projects completed as well as in the works. So we wanted to advise council of some plans and recommendations of recommended additional surface treatment roads to utilize the existing budget. The roads that we've noted in the report are County Road 8, which is in Algonquin Highlands from approximately Russell Landing to Camp Dorset Road. We've got County Road 9, which is in Highlands East, and that's from approximately Paul Lane to just south of Inlet Bay Road. And the last one we're recommending at this time is County Road 19, which is in Dysart et al. And that's approximately from Indian Point Road to Pluto Trail. These are all preliminary numbers, and staff we're monitoring these items, and we will likely be back in the fall with an additional report regarding this, the roads budget, but we're also putting together with our new treasurer summaries regarding our structures as well as fleet, etc. And open to any questions that council may have.
Councillor DeVolen.
Well, what a great news story. I mean, to see the savings in hot mix paving, I mean, I'm over the moon. And these other things that we can expand and do, many of them, you know, a roof and some other surface treatment. Anyways, it's lovely to see us tack mid-season and have the ability to complete these throughout the year, that they didn't spill over into another year. So awesome savings, and to rather than have a surplus pile up here, let's do a bunch of other good work and get it done this year. So I couldn't be happier. So thank you, Robert.
Any other questions or comments on the capital budget summary? Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Warden. This may be, I'm not sure, in the right space, and it might have been, should have been with the last report, but it's regarding the rail trail and the grant. Should I hold that question for later? Was it under the status report? Because all I saw for rail trail was just sort of grading and surfacing, and I thought that was regular maintenance. But my question is, and you can tell me if I'm out of order, is when to expect the work on the rail trail that we received the grant for?
I think it's an appropriate time to ask that question.
Thank
and
you.
I'm sure that Robert has a response.
Yes, no, thank you. Regarding the status report, it is challenging to see, but there are two items noted regarding the rail trail, both grading as well as resurfacing for the fall. So our work is planned for this fall at this time, and we will be bringing a rail trail status report to council. Councillor Moffat and I, with the departure of our tourism director, are working on some stuff offline. And so we both have a roundtable, but also a status report to bring to council. So the grading and the resurfacing are scheduled for this fall. And we also will have some status reports coming to council itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this capital budget summary? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives the Rhodes Capital Budget Summary Report and that Haliburton County Council approve the proposed budget allocations as noted in the report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much, Robert.
Thank you.
It's 10 o'clock. I'm just wondering if council wishes a break or if we should try and push through to where we get to the closed session portion of the meeting. Thoughts on that? Carry on. Okay. So next up are the reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. Anything from the health unit?
Unmute. No, we don't meet in the summertime, although we did actually have a special meeting, but that's beside the point. Not a regular meeting. And so just sort of in terms of the COVID side of it, it's everybody gets information as quickly as I do, even as a board member. So, just keep promoting to people get their vaccinations.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Shell is not here, so we won't hear anything about point in time. With respect to the Warden's Caucus, you all received a report from me, which I apologize for its late submission. I was going to do a verbal report and thought it might be a better idea to submit something in writing. Primarily, it's covering the points and the presentations that we're going to be making to the ministers at AMO in a couple of weeks. A little bit of detail there. We have asked for just a little bit more time than normally we're allotted 45 minutes, which is not a lot of time given the number of people that attend and the number of issues that we want to discuss and the weight of some of them. So we've asked for an extra 15 minutes. And to be honest, I'm not sure whether we've been allotted that time or not. But there are 2 or 3 other smaller, they're priorities, but they're at the bottom end of our priorities that we hope to address if we're given that additional time. There were 2 items on the Warden's report that I did want to bring up. It was interesting to note that with respect to ongoing discussions and relationships with Indigenous organizations, all of the individual wardens had a considerable amount of information to provide to the caucus about things like acknowledgements and working groups and relationships that they have with on discussing things like roadworks in the area of a reserve area, a variety of different things. The community safety and well-being plan. There's a lot of work there that's being. There's some coordinated work there, but it became very obvious that the acknowledgement itself of the use of Indigenous land is something that I believe that council should be thinking about, and I'm seeking your thoughts on that. If you're in support, we might look at some examples of what's being, what the acknowledgements are, what different acknowledgements are being used and the wording of them. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. You and I had talked a bit about this previously. I recently had just a regular follow-up or check-in phone call with my counterpart to the west, Mayor Terry Glover from Lake Bays. And the Muskoka district has a number of First Nations in its geography, and they have developed just a casual roundtable among elected officials and various chiefs and representatives from those First Nations. And he says it's fabulous and that there's no agendas and no set outcome. It's just to sort of reach across the table and understand better and more about each other's histories and communities. Following that, I had over a year ago taken a business card of a gentleman from Rama, and I have reached out to him for assistance with a land acknowledgement and had already put it on the Algonquin Highlands agenda for August. So I will be asking Algonquin Highlands Council to consider an acknowledgement. I think the time has come, and yeah, I think there's an opportunity there to make that step, and I support it, and have already started collecting various acknowledgements in a little file. So for our consideration at Algonquin Highlands, I'm happy to share those, but I'm in support.
Yeah, that'd be great if you'd share, some of the information that you've got. And but Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you. Is the thought that we would declare make a statement at the beginning of each meeting and every meeting? I know when at the inauguration for Dysart Council, it was important to me to have that, and I had local Larry O'Connor come and do a land acknowledgement at the beginning of the inauguration, but we don't say everything at each meeting. I don't say anything. So is that the thought through you, Madam Warden, to Councillor Moffat? It was my idea that we would discuss it and come to some conclusion about whether we wanted to do it at our inaugural meeting, at every meeting that we have. I know many organizations do offer an acknowledgement at every meeting that they have. So that's up to council to discuss. I also did speak to Mr. O'Connor just before our inaugural meeting, and it was a matter of timing. And I had hoped that we would have this discussion a little bit sooner, but here we are. Councillor Moffat, I see that you had a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to try and jump back in there. And that's, I think, one of the most important things. Land acknowledgements are important. They can be lengthy. And what some folks have done is, in the implementation of an acknowledgement is where the breadth and depth is. And should the decision be made to do an acknowledgement at the beginning of each meeting, it's a condensed version, having had the fulsome acknowledgement in the initiation of the program. And part of it too is we're all within the Williams Treaty area, but our various municipalities were used differently by First Nations. So the reason I reached out to the gentleman in Rama is because the 1850 census for Stanhope counted some people from Rama. So this was summer traveling grounds for those folks. I'm getting to the extent of my historical knowledge here. So I thought it appropriate to reach out to him to say, this is your people's traveling area. Can you help? And he said, once our council has a conversation, he would be happy to review anything and make sure we plug in the right people for the right reasons. We want to make sure it's not just blanket feel good stuff. Let's do it right.
Any other thoughts on that? So council would be in concurrence with us asking staff to look into this, and I look to Councillor Moffat to help us a bit and share with us what she's gathered. I think that would help. And we'll bring a report back to council. The other item that I wanted to ask council about is the consideration of of our states of our declaration of emergency. I've mentioned it several times to council in the past that I know that we all have a declaration of emergency in place still at this time. It had been my hope that if we were going to take action and declare that we're no longer in a state of emergency, that we would do that together. So I'm seeking some concurrence about thoughts on that particular topic. Councillor DeBowen and then Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, it would be wonderful we could do it together. It has been my intention for over a month that after I came back from holidays, and I've notified my control group in Minden Hills and whatever, that we will meet either Tuesday or Wednesday. We haven't thrashed that out next week for our control group, unless somebody can give me a compelling reason to not withdraw it, given where we're at and the reasons why I did it initially in Minden Hills. I see is removed. And the other part to remind others that haven't done multiple declarations is that if circumstances change, it can be done and instilled again. And just it's one more step to recovery. And I'll be honest, our control group meetings are less regular and pretty light lifting. Kind of the metamorphosis of staff and operations have come around to such that in my mind, unless I find a compelling reason to continue it, probably is to rescind it in Minden Hills next week.
Councillor Moffat.
The Algonquin Highlands Control Group met yesterday, and our fire chief as CEMC advised that the 4 CEMCs, or I guess 5 in the county, had decided that on recommending that it be reassessed after Thanksgiving when school gets back. So you may hear that next week, Brent, in your meeting. So I agree that we should all do the same thing. Algonquin Highlands was the last to sign up. I can see it both ways. I can see that I agree with Brent in terms of it's one more step to normalcy. Can also, and it can be it's just a flick of a pen and it's back in place. Can also see that it's remaining in place to see what the fall brings is also no harm, no foul. I could go either way at this point. I don't see anything compelling in either direction.
Our discussions at the EOC at the county, and I agree with you, Councillor DeVolen, the meetings are lighter than they were. Not a lot of weighty matters. The thing about the declaration is that there's a checklist that you go through to determine whether or not you should have that declaration in place, and we just don't meet the criteria for that checklist. But again, I was hoping that we would be able to make a decision to do it simultaneously across the county. So therein, we're having this discussion. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Just to clarify to Councillor Moffat, you said after Thanksgiving or after Labor Day? Just to be, I'm not quite ready to do it next week, talking with our fire chief, but soon. And I do like the idea. We're all more or less in the same situation. And so I would like to try to coordinate it a little bit, but I also don't see the harm in waiting a few more weeks, but I just want to clarify, did you mean after Thanksgiving or after Labor Day?
Thanksgiving is what I wrote down. So I sure hope that's what I heard. I believe it was Thanksgiving.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Warden. I'm certainly would support us doing it together. I know it's going to be challenging for us to probably pick or select a date, but I would certainly like to hear a bit more from the maybe the chiefs of our committees to see if what their feeling is as well.
Our EOC had initially talked about the end of July, but I can see that is too soon from what I'm hearing. So I'm kind of getting mixed responses. So I'm wondering if maybe we leave it for a couple of weeks and maybe bring it up again at say Committee of the Whole, which would be August the 11th, and see where we are then. I don't see any harm in us, just sort of keeping our finger on the pulse of what we're each doing. Councillor DeVolen, then Councillor Moffat.
Before I have our meeting, I won't commit one way or the other. It's a call by the head of council. I'm the one that made it. I look at the conditions as been noted, and if I don't think the conditions exist, I'd love to do this all together. Thanksgiving is an awfully long way, unless the world really changes. Like, there's no way I'm waiting that long. But having said that, I would love to hear from others in their control group, including my own next week, to reconsider. But like I say, I look at the science and the numbers, whatever, and the conditions that are on the original checklist, and like, unless somebody convinces me, I can't justify it at this time.
Councillor Moffat.
I was just going to say, I don't think Brent's going to wait. So,
Okay.
you know, our EOC is still meeting roughly every 2 weeks, but like everybody else, we met yesterday and we had the Dorset Tower. We had one thing on our agenda, other than some just sort of generalized chatter. And we've all been in these meetings for well over a year. We're into our high 50s or low 60s in terms of numbers of meetings. It is definitely a very different day. The Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing made it very clear that a declaration allowed those with unionized services to be able to second people among various departments, which doesn't affect Algonquin Highlands because we don't have a union. I'm 50-50. I think if we wait 2 weeks, Brent's probably going to pull next week, and then we're out of step again. So I think we should generally agree today, like you're asking, on something. When does everyone's EOC meet? We're still meeting every 2 weeks for about 20 minutes. So it'd be very easy to say, let's get a giddy up on this decision. Are people's EOC still meeting?
The county council's EOC is meeting every 2 weeks, and I think that we're even looking at maybe stretching that out to every 3 weeks, given the number of items that we've got to discuss, unless something happens that causes us to bring us together. So if you're only meeting once every 3 weeks, there's obviously not a lot of issues of concern, and we all know that there may be some changes in the fall, but we don't know what they are, and we may be being overly cautious. I still kind of go back to the checklist, and that we're not meeting the criteria of the need for a state of emergency any longer. Councillor DeVolen.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give some thought to the conversations. I won't commit to anything at this time. Like I say, I mean, I was first in. It wouldn't be too surprising if I was first out.
Any other thoughts? Okay, well, I really appreciate the conversation. I had hoped that we might be a little bit more in sync, but I think we'll bring this discussion up again at our next meeting and see where we stand. And meanwhile, I guess we'll do what we're going to do. Any other thoughts on that, Councillor Moffat?
Thank you. We've had this discussion. It's clear Brent is going in a different direction. I think as long as we're within a few weeks of each other, we don't all have to say, on Friday at noon, we all pull the plug. I think it's important to say we don't all meet at the same time. So as long as we all generally agree that we're going to consider it, and it's probably a good thing, we don't meet the checklist anymore, then I don't think it matters if it happens at each of our next EOCs, as long as it isn't Minden next week and Dysart at Thanksgiving, Algonquin Highlands at Christmas. That would just be crazy making. So if we can just get it in a couple of weeks, we've had this conversation. I think that's probably.
Well, and my concern about the county's declaration is that it does cover the entire county, and if you've got two of your 4 municipalities under a state of emergency, to me it kind of would make sense that the counties would remain. But my thinking might be a little off center on that. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Warden. When does the county EOC meet again?
This afternoon.
Is it possible? Obviously, that's going to be on your discussion today. Are you able to share that conversation with the mayors?
I can. The issue is really, as Brent said, it kind of falls to me, and it's my hope that we would be able to do something together. And when I have asked the committee for their thoughts, basically we have looked to the health unit to give us their thoughts on whether the declaration should remain. And up until the last meeting, there was some thinking on their part that maybe we should keep the declaration in place. But at our last meeting, he simply said, look, there's no real need for it. You may have to declare again in the fall, but you may not. So he recommended rescinding. But the committee have little to say about it. They just kind of look to me on that particular subject.
Yes, and it's the same in each of our EOCs, as Brent Councillor Dvolan just stated, it is ultimately the mayor that made the declaration, the mayor that will lift it. But we look to guidance. That's why we work in those groups, and our group has worked so well. So I just maybe you can share whatever conversation your group decides today. Oh, we're looking at 2 weeks out. We're looking at 4 weeks out. Either way, I guess we'll make our decisions. But I would appreciate your if you're whatever you can share from your EOC confidentially back. That would be good.
Absolutely. Will do. Okay, so if there's nothing further on that, we will move on to a joint social and housing services. Anything there, Councillor Dvolan?
We meet quarterly. We don't meet again till September, so there's nothing to say at this time.
Okay, my apologies. It's on the list, and so I'm going to ask you every meeting when it's on the list. And I don't believe there's anything on professional recruitment, or is there? Okay. Anything on the library board that you'd like to bring to our attention?
Not really, other than the libraries are open, which is just fantastic. Limited hours, so check the website, but it's really nice to see the buildings being open. I was in the other day at Dysart Branch, and there was people doing work at their computers at tables, and so it's great to see that.
I also understand that that the posting for the CEO's position has closed. I think we have a number of interesting applications, and the process for hiring is underway.
Absolutely, I forgot to comment on that. Pardon me. Yeah, so myself and the chair, Sally Housen, and another board member, David O'Brien, are the hiring committee. So we'll be fingers crossed. It's yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the last item under this section is the land division activity report. As Mr. Stone is here, he might comment on that. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Warden, rest of council. So a quick summary, which is one application for right-of-way was presented to Land Division Committee this past month, and it was approved. And it looks like we'll have some activity again this month, maybe 1 or 2 applications to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the land division report? I believe we have a resolution to receive that. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Councillor McKechnie and Councillor Dvolan.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Dvolan. Be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 staff report on land division activity be received for information by Haliburton County Council.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And under external boards and agencies, is there anything that you'd like to bring to our attention on the Good Roads board?
Yes, thank you. This is going to be an interesting one for most of us, but FOCA and OGRA are doing a survey of municipalities to understand the extent and challenges associated with private roads in cottage country. We have looked into our snowmobile crossings. We're doing an analysis of technologies that can be used to prevent damage to pavements where snowmobiles cross on municipal roads. And I know that, Brent, that was near to your heart. Our minimum maintenance standard training, we're convening a one-day training session this fall, and the details will be along. Our Eastern, I'm kind of excited about this, our Eastern Road School is happening in person in Kingston this fall, and there will be some more details on our website to follow. And that is my report.
Any questions of Councillor Burton? Councillor Dvolan?
Just a comment. I'm happy to hear them talking about applying some technologies to road crossings to protect them, but I just want to bring to council and the public's attention that snowmobiles pay on buying their fuel Ontario road tax, and with the exception of road crossings, there's a big pool of money that they contribute, of which they get little to no value from my perspective of the actual operation of the machine. So just to sensitize that you say, well, maybe they shouldn't do it and damage the road. They're already spending millions every year through Ontario road tax. That's really the only negative impact that they have on roads.
Yep, agreed.
It's interesting to note the partnership with FOCA on looking at the challenges of private roads. I look forward to seeing the results and any recommendations that would come from that, and the resulting discussion from those recommendations. Councillor Roberts.
I don't know, did Councillor Burton want to respond to that or just a chuckle? Just a chuckle.
Well, it's going to be interesting.
No, it's a good partnership. It makes sense. Just back to the snowmobile crossings, I remember our previous Director of Public Works, Craig Douglas, was talking about perhaps doing a sample area where they use this, I don't know what it is, some kind of plasticky material. Remember it was green and it goes across the road. I just wonder, as we're doing roadworks for, I guess it would be the whole year after that, if we would consider doing something in like a really high traffic area, say in front of the high school, where the road has a severe dip in it due to the amount of snowmobile traffic coming off of the rail trail onto Head Lake. If council would at all be interested in entertaining, seeing how much it costs to do a little section like that.
I think it would be worth investigating for sure. Councillor DeVolen.
And just to remind, where it's been tried successfully is the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. So the people just need to be renewed. That's where it's been used. And it was done a couple of years ago. And Councillor Kennedy, when he first got elected, brought this to the floor. It would be interesting a couple of years later to see how the longer term effects of using that polymer crossing technology, how it's lasted now that it's been there for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that that Good Roads have been in contact, and I'm going to say it's with Minnesota, Brent, to see how successful their project was.
Councillor Royale.
Yeah, I think Councillor Roberts and Councillor DeVolen are right. We've got a section across the 503 which connects the IB&O, and it gets the, pardon the expression, crap knocked out of it year after year. So if there is an opportunity to put a product down, especially if it's cost effective, both from the point of maintenance and from the point of application, it would be a good thing. And if it's not that expensive, possibly we look at a couple of pilot sites to determine whether all the circumstances would be the same.
I have requested a Good Roads that the pilot project, if there is going to be one, will be in Haliburton County. I probably was leaning a bit towards the east, but I'm pretty sure.
Why would that be? I wonder if it might be an idea to have our CAO just mention this as something that we'd like our Public Works Department to consider, and see what sort of costs are associated with it and whether it will and how it will fit into our next year's budget. Is that something that you'd like us to do?
If I may, Warden?
Yes, go ahead.
I just feel maybe that might be a bit premature. I'd like to see what comes out of this, what Good Roads are doing before we, and I'm sure they'll be in contact with our roads people.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I hate to ask what sort of updates we might have from Eorn.
Not a lot that I can share, but I would say this: the sands under our feet are shifting, and there are meetings, and Mike, even this week, about that involve representatives of both the provincial and federal government. So we're kind of awaiting to see where that's going. That now, just to clarify things, the mobile broadband and the project that's underway that's currently happening now, this has nothing to do with that. This is for what follows that and the synergies and the value that will be to areas like Haliburton County and the rest of Eastern Ontario. But I mean, we'll see, right, Mike? I think, could I say any more than that? I think we'll have a clearer notion of where things may or may not be going on a couple of levels with the kind of a myriad of federal and provincial programs that are upon us.
Yeah, I think if I might, the provincial government last week announced, or maybe 2 weeks ago now, announced a reverse auction process. And so, and the federal government has also done, a rapid response stream through UBF, the Universal Broadband Fund. So I think we're continuing to try and understand where EORN fits in all of that, if in fact they do. And we're continuing to have those conversations but I think it's safe to say that EORN has made themselves available to assist in any way that the federal or provincial government would like us to.
Any questions on that? Okay, next up is the Poverty Reduction Roundtable and some updates there. A lot of information. Go ahead, Councillor DeVolen.
And it is, and I think it speaks for itself, but I would say this, given the fact, as I got back to work on Monday, we had a poverty reduction roundtable meeting on Monday afternoon, and they shared the information that was coming to County Council, and our friends to the south, the question was, well, that would be valuable to the city of Kawartha Lakes, and couldn't and shouldn't we offer up the same information to the city of Kawartha Lakes that we now are seeing from the roundtable. So I don't have anything more than what's in it. It's a wonderful piece and does a lot better conveying all the moving pieces better than I did. And like I say, I think the fact that it's looked at so well, whatever, that I think the city of Kawartha Lake councillors are going to be getting the same kind of information in the not too distant future.
Any questions of Councillor DeVolen? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the roundtable update? Councillor Moffat and Councillor Roberts.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Roberts. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the second quarter update from the Haliburton County City of Kawartha Lakes Roundtable for Ending Poverty Working Group and the related documents forwarded to Strategy Corp in response to their request for input into the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan process.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I believe we have nothing further under Indigenous Affairs other than our discussion that we've already held. Under other business, any errors or omissions in the August calendar? Hearing none. Next is the draft electronic signature policy that our Director of IT has spoken to us before about. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of council. Before you today is a draft policy for the use of electronic signatures at the county. We've been working with the municipal clerks on acquiring an electronic signature solution for use at the county and for municipalities. And before we proceeded with that implementation, it was felt that we should all have a policy in place first. This draft policy was actually created by the staff at Minden Hills who kindly shared it with the county and the other 3 local municipalities. The policy talks about how and when staff should use electronic signatures, as well as defines the document types that shall always require a wet or handwritten signature. The policy states that if requested by a signatory, the county will also allow a document to be signed by hand if they didn't have the means to sign electronically. Minden Hills had this policy reviewed by their solicitor, John Ewart, and implemented the suggestions that was provided by him. That letter has been attached to the report. And again, just want to say a big thanks to the Deputy Clerk at Minden Hills for doing the heavy lifting on this policy and then sharing her work with everyone involved. So happy to take any questions about the policy or anything to do about electronic signatures.
Any questions? Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the draft electronic signature policy? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor McKechnie, thank you.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor McKechnie. Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the July 28th, 2021 report on the draft electronic signature policy, and that Haliburton County Council adopt the draft electronic signature policy.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks for your work on this, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, next is our closed session. Councillor Roberts?
We missed the discussion because there's probably no resolution in front of you. There's the discussion on short-term rental review process. We said before we could do anything, we as a county council needed to talk. Otherwise, staff they don't know what we want them to do.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I completely.
Don't you worry, I've done it before.
Well, okay, before we go into close, we will have a fulsome discussion about short-term rental and how we think we should proceed. And I might look to our CAO maybe to speak to that first, and then Councillor Moffat.
Well, thank you. I guess I've had some preliminary conversations with the CAOs, and we were obviously anxious to hear from County Council on the process that you would be wanting us to follow. I guess our mind was a little bit, mirroring the process that we have followed with the Shoreline Preservation Bylaw, hopefully with a smoother start. But we would, there has been a lot of work done by the local municipalities, including drafting of a survey or a couple surveys. So we thought if we did a request for proposal to retain some consulting assistance for this, to have a first step being a review of the reasons for regulating or not regulating. What are the issues that we are encountering at the local municipalities and at the county? What are some of the issues that need to be addressed? Then doing a best practices analysis, review of what other communities are doing, lessons learned, what's working, what isn't working, those kinds of things. Then doing an engagement exercise, which may include the survey that has been drafted already or some form of that. And then ultimately asking that consultant to develop a draft bylaw or just even a report suggesting next steps and what county council could consider. So we thought that, sort of mirroring that process might work really well with this new the new issue. So even though it's not really a new issue, it's been dealt with many times at your local council tables. So that's the conversation that the CAOs had. But again, we recognize that is, we're just staff and we're really looking for county council to provide some direction.
First of all, I would never say that you're just staff.
Well,
because I think you're all so much more than that. And before I look for questions or comments, I have to offer my sincere apologies. I got a little bit ahead of myself on this particular topic. I'd been talking to Mike about it quite a bit and sort of publicly stated that we might follow a process similar to that we've used for the Shoreline Preservation draft bylaw. And should we decide to go in a different direction, I'll just have to wear that. So I look to council for comments or thoughts on what process we might use. First Carol, then Brent, then Andrea.
Yeah, so I mean, this is, we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. Town of the Blue Mountains was first, Huntsville's done it. Niagara on the Lake has a robust policy in place. There's also consideration of the tourist tax. All of these things will send a lot of folks out into orbit. There's no question. On the other side of that, though, we have to acknowledge as a community that unfortunately we sometimes have to govern for the bad apples. We have a situation ongoing that continues to escalate in Algonquin Highlands, where one property beside a rental, and I won't name the company, is for sale, and two other neighbors are considering selling. They can't get any action from the rental company, and to the extent that children are feeling uncomfortable. People are staying away. You know, we have a property owner who stayed away last weekend because the neighbor said, you know, there's this big, huge party and best not to come up because it's just going to be a nightmare. And so there are good people who rent well to good people, and there's never a peep, never a problem. That's not who this is for. And I think that's what needs to be made very, very clear, is that we are being pushed into governing for the bad apples. And there are companies, I don't know, but I'm sure we have all received emails from companies who have read about our challenges across the county and have said, hey, this is what we do. We can help you sort out your short-term rental management policy and process. So I don't think this can happen fast enough for us. The landscape and the community, I keep saying, is changing very quickly. And if we don't put this genie back in the bottle, we'll forever become a community that we don't want to be anymore. So I would absolutely support immediately going out, crafting the details of an RFP and getting it done. We need to get this done soon so that the good tax paying residents don't feel they have to sell their properties because they can't get any peace and quiet. And we're not talking about somebody had a bonfire and they were making, giggling at 11 o'clock. We're talking about green lights shining in windows and gunfire on occasions and language. The one last weekend, somebody who was, and I'll stop after this, but somebody who was renting found the neighbor on social media and sent them a threatening message through Messenger. It's not on. This stuff's not on.
No. Councillor Volin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could all anecdotally in our jurisdictions have a grocery list of the incidents. I mean, there are two growing animals within our jurisdiction: the misuse of public lands that are adjacent to private lands, in this particular one with short-term accommodations, and certainly by the CAO with conversations with the other CAOs, process the RFP to get on with this. It cannot happen fast enough. And if it's imperfect, I mean, whatever we craft, it can be a living document. And like I say, there's lots of good practice out there. Like, let's get on with this. This is like you say, we're beginning to be who we don't want to be. And it's an unfortunate tool that I think we have to use, and let's get on with it.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. I have a bit of a tickle, so I might have to not finish. But anyway, I don't think you spoke out of turn, Warden. I don't think that there's any other way than to hire a consultant to pull all that information together. Yeah. I'm gonna cough. It's not pretty.
Okay.
I'll take it. I'll take a moment if I can.
Okay. Made in Highlands East when they had their open house was the fact that, you've got bylaws in place that you're having a challenge enforcing, and now you're putting another one in place, and how are you going to manage that? So that of course is all part of the equation, and something that we have to, I'm not suggesting in any way that we don't do it because of that, but it is, it's one of the elephants in the room for sure. I guess we can go back to Councillor Roberts now. Are you ready?
Yeah, I found some water. I had no drink with me the whole morning and I forgot to put something. So I apologize for that. The only other thing I wanted to add is, certainly as a representative from Dysart Council, like I'm willing to do some kind of a cost sharing. Hiring a consultant is never, and getting a good one to do a proper review of everything isn't cheap. So I don't know, or through you, Mike, if you would discuss with the CAOs, we have done that before where we've done sort of 50% at the county and the other 50% through the local municipalities, but that should be part of a consideration too, that this is going to benefit all of us in the long run. One of the things that I've talked about in a licensing program, one thing that's sort of bothersome to me, I have owned a cottage and been the landlord and rented it out. I have rented cottages, actually rented one this summer, which was wonderful. It's a great experience. But when people are purchasing properties for the sole purpose of doing these short-term rentals, that's a little bit bothersome. And I think that's where some of the problems land. So in a licensing program, you can limit the number of days in a year that a person can rent. So it isn't 365 days a year. It's whatever, 180 max. That's it. There's lots of things that we can do. I'm not sure if we can address all of the things. Like Councillor Moffat referenced, we're finding that a lot of these things are policing issues as well. But anyway, back to the cost sharing, maybe Mike can talk to the CAOs and come up with a bit of a plan for that. I think that would be fair.
Well, we do all ultimately end up sharing the cost, through the county's portion of our taxation. So, but that's, definitely something our CAOs can discuss and bring back to us if council is in concurrence with that. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Any other thoughts on this topic? Councillor Ryall and then Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, we've been, as you know, we've been wrestling with this thing for quite a while, at least 3 years that I can think of, possibly even longer. And I don't know if it's physically possible, but if we could have something in place by the seasonal year next year, it would be something awesome. And having been through it partially ourselves alone, I think the addition of a consultant is definitely going to, I don't want to say fast track it, because I don't want to imply that we're going to cut any of the due diligence out of it, but merely get it better organized so that it can be flowing in a much better path. So whatever funding formula we come up with, that's outside of what I want to talk about. But I do believe we need to come up with a definite plan that hopefully would result in something to be put into place for the 2022 year. And I would be so totally support that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Moffat.
I was going to basically say the same thing. I think we need to have an idea when we're going into budget cycle, what this is going to cost, because it's the administration and enforcement of any program that will cost the big bucks. And so we need to know that going into our various budget cycles.
I would ask the CAO, have we given you clear enough direction?
Absolutely. I guess, is it
resolution?
I don't need a resolution. I think we've already received direction to do it, and the local municipalities have provided their resolutions of support. I guess my only question is timeline and process. Does council, our practice is to bring the draft RFPs to council. I'm hearing how you're really seeing this as an urgent thing, but if we were to bring that draft RFP to county council in August, is that an acceptable time frame?
I'm seeing most nodding heads. Did you have a comment, Councillor Moffat? Yours is the only head that was not nodding.
Well, I am nodding. I think August and then a couple of weeks to put it out there, and now we're into the fall, and then people are starting to talk. We do our projects and priorities in October. Are we squeezing too much into getting into preliminary budget discussions? We can only work with the time we have, unless we're going to have a special meeting, which I don't know that anybody wants to do that, but it's up to the group, obviously. But yeah, I just soon.
Do we need the RFP brought back to council for review? Councillor DeBolen.
I don't.
Any other comments? Councillor Roberts.
I don't actually as well, but at the same time, because I think there's been enough discussion of certainly accepting the proponent will be a different thing, but the actual RFP going out is different. I think county council will want to see what the different proposals when they come in. We want to review that. I don't think we can go any faster. So, I mean, any company like that's going to take time to put a package together. Maybe we don't need to see it at our council meeting, but we could give direction to set a deadline of when we want those proposals to come back. Maybe that's what we could do today, instead of excuse me, reviewing the RFPs, and then they can't go out till after the county council meeting. could we set the date for when we would expect proposals to be back? And we just have to work with the calendar that we have. We can only do so much, but we need to just move this one step forward. There's never a good time, and maybe in the proposals that will be that you don't implement it till later, but people start booking cottages in January for the summer season. So there's no perfect time to start something like this, but we don't wait either.
Thoughts on the practicality of timing, Mike?
We'll work as quickly as we possibly can. I mean, we could, certainly, and we've seen this even with the shoreline preservation process. It was once council saw the response, we started working with the consultant, and there was a tweaking to the process that involved expanding the consultation. So, I think as long as you're okay generally with what I've described, we could draft an RFP. I would probably suggest that we could have that sent to the CAOs to have their input on it, and certainly you, Warden Danielson, we could do that, and then we could get the RFP out more quickly, and then we'll typically, I think it's important to leave them in the marketplace for 3 to 4 weeks so that we get some good responses. We have to remember that it is summer, and although we're not taking a break, others do, and so sometimes it's challenging to get responses. We've seen that in some other recent RFPs that we've done. So I think if we leave it in the marketplace for 3 to 4 weeks, then we can work pretty quickly with your schedules to do an evaluation of those, and we can be going before the end of the year for sure. But that would be my sense.
And my concern would be the same as Councillor Roberts, that to me it's more important, rather than seeing the RFP itself, it's to see the responses that the proponents have got, and do any tweaking that we think needs to be done with what they're proposing to do. If that sounds reasonable. Okay. Anything further on that subject? Okay. It is now 10:52. If we're going into closed, shall we take a short break until, say, 11:15? Does that sound reasonable? Okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder to move into closed? Councillor DeVolen and Councillor Moffat.
By Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that Haliburton County Council enter into closed session as per section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended for the following reasons: personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
All in favor? That's carried. We'll see you at 11:15.
And we're back live.
Welcome back to the open session. The next item of business is the adoption of our bylaws. The first one being a bylaw to appoint a treasurer. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor DeVolen, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor DeVolen, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that bylaw 4058, being a bylaw to appoint a treasurer for the corporation of the county of Haliburton, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. The next is the bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement to retain a consultant for municipal plan reviews of technical reports. I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Roberts and Councillor Burton.
Moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Burton, be it resolved that bylaw 4059, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement to retain a consultant for municipal plan review of technical reports, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any notice of motions? Hearing none, if I could have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Royale, Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor Ryle, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that bylaw 4060, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the July 28th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council, be considered to be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, and the seal of the corporation be affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to Councillor DeVolen.
I think our new colleague, Councillor McKechnie, should be informed to hold up the side that if he would do the motion for the adjournment.
I was just going to tell him about that. Councillor Kennedy, we always look to make the motion to adjourn our meetings. And so we would look to you to carry on with that tradition on his behalf. So moved by Councillor McKechnie and seconded by Councillor Moffat.
Moved by Councillor McKechnie, seconded by Councillor Moffat, be it resolved that the July 28th, 2021 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Thank you, everyone,
everyone.
for my first time here, and you guys are very professional, and as I always knew, but I got to take part in it, and I can see the county's in good hands. So, thank you, and sure hope that I'm not here very long, even though I wouldn't mind having this seat. To tell you the truth, very interesting, but
Thanks.
I sure hope it's soon. He'll be back.
Okay, bye.
That big